Hasan, Piker and Samsen are just the tip of the iceberg of part of the online leftist political community that kind of dislikes debate content.
Debate bros, much like the warrior classes that they play in their RPG games, don't know how to do much else but fight.
And it really worries me that so many people are falling for what I see as sophistry.
What I am saying is stop doing debates. Just stop it. Stop doing them. They're pointless, they're useless, they reinforce bad ideals of knowledge creation.
Stop watching debate content. Seriously, just stop.
Debates are a performance. Debates are purely performative. It is a rhetorical performance. It is intellectual, pseudo-intellectual WWE, okay? That's it.
There are some legitimate reasons to criticize online debates, like the possibility of being led astray by sophistry that is exacerbated by the parasocial bias one develops for content creators, or the tendency for debates to meander into abrasive attempted Duncan festivals.
You're literally on your ass for a living! Get up!
We do have to... Go ahead, Steven.
But some of the criticism various content creators have voiced can be a tad excessive, and occasionally may appear to betray a fundamental misunderstanding of the efficacy of good argumentations. Hypotheticals are not a debate tactic. In a video with the objective of highlighting the negative aspects of debate culture, Samsen first takes issue with hypotheticals.
It's these sorts of nonsense magic fairy tale wonderland hypotheticals that have no use outside of the performative debate context that end up leaving a lasting impression on the internet.
Edge case hypotheticals are meant to test the logical implications of an argument. They have the goal to show that an argument may be flawed or lead to unwanted conclusions. In the ethical domain, they are often purposefully constructed so that they are both intuitively morally abhorrent and logically implied by the argument they are testing. This is why many debaters come up with hypotheticals that have to do with rape, genocide, or general brutalities. They have to fulfill the intuitively morally abhorrent quota of a procedure, the extreme quota.
Let's say that there is a woman, she's locked in a fucking cage, and it says not going to be freed until she's raped.
Now, admittedly, debaters could and should be more delicate when using this technique, and maybe explain what they are doing, but it is a very effective way of understanding the scope of one's argument. It's okay to say,
I do, however, have a problem with people being framed as endorsing the extreme outcomes of these hypotheticals.
But if you don't agree with the logical implications of your own conclusion, you can and should change your argument. Otherwise, people might think you are okay with those extreme implications. More on this later. In the same vein, refusing to engage in a hypothetical.
Imagine aliens come down to Earth and they say...
This is absolutely ridiculous, Vaush.
Is okay if you provide reasons why such a hypothetical is not implied by your argument or not relevant, but not because...
This is as hypothetical idealism as you can get. The problem that I've seen you have in your discussions is that we have these hypothetical discussions about what we should do or shouldn't do, or after the revolution, will this happen or will this exist, and blah, blah, blah. And we construct hypothetical scenarios about the future, and then we think that that's what we should base all of our praxis and activism on. So in other words, we come up with the ideas first, which Engels described as utopianism, Marx and Engels described as utopianism, and then we think like, okay, we've got this perfect vision for where we want to be. Now we have to get from here to there, and we have to dogmatically stay that course. That would be, would you agree that that's an idealist basis for moving a movement forward, a political movement? Okay, so when you conceptualize things with aliens and things that don't happen on planet Earth, that's a useless rhetorical strategy.
Hypotheticals are ubiquitously used when talking seriously about ethical matters. They are not a rhetorical tactic, and they should be expected in a conversation that deals with what is right or wrong. One should also use them on his own to check the logical extensions of the positions he stands for. Comprehending their use may also allow one to grasp where certain arguments lead, something that is of fundamental importance for having good discourse and minimize misunderstandings in political discussions such as the following.
We saw the same problem with hypotheticals arise in Vaush's recent debate with YouTuber Noncompete, where he opposed this hypothetical regarding Jews being overrepresented in banking during the Weimar Republic.
Whenever people have been enslaved, if they rise up and use violence to liberate themselves, then that is probably acceptable because they had material conditions in which they...
Like the Nazis?
Rising up against the Nazis was acceptable, yes.
No. After World War I, the Nazis claimed that Jewish bankers were holding the country down.
And that was false consciousness because that wasn't actually happening.
How can you tell?
That was false consciousness. Their ideology was not aligned with reality.
How can you tell?
Because Jews don't actually control banks in the world.
There was a disproportionate number of Jewish control of banks in Germany during the Weimar Republic.
All right, Vaush, we're done here. Thank you. Goodbye. This is that's all I need to hear.
You don't have an ethical... Oh my god.
In response to Noncompete's claim that no, the Jews did not control the banks,
Jews don't actually control banks in the world.
Vaush responds with, actually, yes they did.
There was a disproportionate number of Jewish control of banks in Germany during the Weimar Republic.
The reason Noncompete hung up here wasn't because his ethical system had been exposed or whatever these guys are always talking about.
You don't have an ethical... Oh my god.
But because even engaging with this claim that Jews controlled the banks at any level of historical specificity cedes the entire argument to the fascists. Whether they did or not should be irrelevant. The real question is, why would this matter?
Here, for example, Noah doesn't catch that he is exactly making Vaush's point. They agree. Vaush brought up Nazis in the debate with Noncompete to highlight that even if Jews had the disproportionate control of the banks, it did not matter. It was wrong to genocide them. Vaush is as anti-Nazi as we get. He has debated far-right types for a living for years, with utter disdain for their ideologies. He is trying to make a point in an argument that revolves around what he assumes is a common agreement between people on the left, that what Nazis did was morally abhorrent. Comprehending the building blocks of arguments and their logical implications. Being able to properly reconstruct the deductive reasoning an argument follows, in full form, is valuable to not experience miscommunications.
Starting to see the online left turn into what it was back during the Gamergate era. One of the biggest common talking points from the right during this era was the left was too afraid to debate and defend their positions. That's why Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro blew up so much. It's because they debated, and they didn't debate well, and they weren't telling the truth. They just debated. Just the fact they were willing to debate gave them more credibility than the left, because nobody on the left wanted to debate.
Yes, famously credible intellectuals Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro.
Here, for example, nowhere did Xanderthal imply that Peterson and Shapiro are great intellectuals. Actually, he implied more of the opposite. Understanding fully the argument map could have aided in avoiding any confusion. One should, ideally, always be able to reconstruct an argument he is hearing in a basic syllogistic form. Otherwise, one is just passively listening to voices speak until he hears some keyword that confirms his pre-existing beliefs. And yes, this concerns the viewers too. Don't be an NPC. Comprehending arguments is not only important for improving oneself and the general discourse, but also because making poor ones hurts your efficacy in changing people's beliefs.
What is a woman? What is a woman?
It's the same as, like, what is a man? It's just a fucking person who is a woman.
So it's great, you're a trans woman, you're not a woman. That's why you have a trans in front of your name, because you're not a woman.
I mean, they're still women. Trans women are still women.
You're a trans woman. Or you wouldn't be called a trans woman. You'd be called a woman.
I mean, but they are. Trans
then
women are called...
a trans woman, then what's a woman?
Like, do you think that... I mean, this person, like... Here, I use this example as well, but, like, here, there you go. Like
womanhood isn't based on
would you consider this... Okay, but, like, would you consider this person a man? Okay, but like, you understand that that's a woman. Like, you would point to them and say that's a woman. Like, you literally understand that we make determinations. We make determinations on, like, what we think people are by looking at them, and the context clues in this circumstance absolutely fit that. And everyone would look at you like you're a crazy person if you were like, that man over there is wearing a fucking yellow jacket.
Regrettably, not all trans women pass. So the unfortunate nature of the argument Hasan is using seems to be invalidating with respect to trans women who aren't close enough to the current archetypal ideal of a woman. Furthermore, the argument is also very straightforward to challenge.
I wouldn't, because of how they look, even though how you look does not determine whether you're a man or a woman.
Why?
I determine how I perceive you, but just because I perceive you that way doesn't mean you're literally that. The Kardashians one time dressed themselves up as old people and went on a tour, and they seriously looked like old people. The makeup, they were presenting as old people. They weren't 70 years old. They looked like old people.
A better argument could have been to say that extending the social category of women to include trans women is a way to empathize with your fellow humans that leads to less pain and alienation. Of course, one can still attack this argument, but it's not going to be as easy as before. Debaters, for best or for worst, have to frequently defend their political positions, so they are acutely aware of the benefits of having good arguments. Great debaters are always thinking about arguments as accurately as they can, as opposed to what some might lead you to believe.
My main goal isn't to fucking thrive on being the big-brained intellectual titan, because when you do that, that just means they are still responding simply to power. You're not actually creating or crafting an argument or showing people a different worldview.
It's actually more the opposite. Debaters are trying to showcase their worldview by crafting sound and valid arguments. They know it can be difficult to make terrible reasoning look good through sheer rhetorical prowess alone. Miscomprehensions may also occur when an argument seems to lead to troubling implications.
My point is that the people who colonize those people, if the people who are there and they live in their own country don't want to live with people who are colonized, they should have the right to determine if they want to live with those people or not. So it's not that every single person is necessarily an oppressor. The thing that people are talking about with racism comes down to the system that people are part of. For example, I'm adopted and my dad is white. He's a European immigrant, actually. And he might not have been a part of the people who have enslaved Black people or descendants of those people, but he's still profiting off of a racist system. And there needs to be some sort of disempowerment of those people as far as power and racist structures in order for there to be equality. So that's the point that I'm getting at. And the reason why I'm being vague is because if you look at different countries who have decolonized themselves, you have like all these different ways that those countries have gone about it. You have people who have been very violent, and you have people who have somehow done it peacefully.
I just don't understand how you could ever morally permit any plan of action which involves the deportation of a people based on their ethnic group, you know? I don't know if that necessarily addresses any of
that ethnic group colonized a group of people.
Oh, sure.
That's
but
how. That's and if we disagree on that line, that's fine. But I think colonized people have to have the right to self-determination, what to do about the people who colonize them.
The
point is that their land is colonized, and they need to get rid of the colonizers.
Okay, but
at that point, it doesn't matter. Like
it does matter.
It doesn't matter if like they're like the original people who did it. The point is that it's still being colonized. And the people who are colonized are still dealing with colonialism, and those people need to get the colonists out. Colonized people have every right to say, you have slaughtered and subjugated us for hundreds of years, and you can no longer stay on stolen land.
The conclusion of this argument can at the very least leave the viewer confused when extending this logic to the current situation in South Africa. If the colonized have every right to decide what to do about the colonizers, does that imply having the right to kill them all if they so choose? A doubt that one can see Professor Flowers experiences herself.
Now I'll ask you again, when it comes to South Africa, what do you think of the 6 million white people who live in that country? Do you think the black people, who are by far the majority, have a right to remove the white population?
I personally don't think that would be a good idea, but I do think that
do they have a right
it's up to. Yeah, I think so. I think they have the right to discuss what to do about that. And if that means that they have to remove the people, then I think that they would have a right to do that. But I think that would be really harsh. And I think that they're not even going to do that.
This confusion connects to another topic of importance. Moral theories help in being consistent. In a part of the debate between Vaush and Professor Flowers, you can see a point where she is questioning her beliefs in real time.
What if people thought within a country that the only way for them to escape colonialism, read racial diversity in their country, was through the wholesale slaughter of the white people who lived there? Do you think that would be justified? Like, if they were like, this is how we're determining our decolonization, would you have a problem with that?
I think that would be pretty messed up, actually. Again, like, I'm not a separatist, but I think people should decide what they need to do. And I also think realistically that just would never happen because it's just really impractical on multiple levels.
So
like
you think it's bad, but you think they have a right to do it?
I think that it depends what the situation is. Like, if that's the only way to get colonizers out, then okay. But again, when you look at people who've been colonized, that's just not what they do.
So
They
just
try to take
okay?
the power. They try to take the power away by taking their businesses back, for example.
Okay, I know how it's normally done because I don't think most of them are as psychotic as the limits of your moral philosophy would allow. But you're saying essentially that you would be okay with them. Like, that's just an okay to you? Like, oh, we killed millions of people because of their race. And I don't necessarily like that, but I think they had a right to do that. Is that what we're going with? What else do you allow in the name of anti-colonialism? What about what Assad does in Syria? Or what about what China does to the Uyghur Muslims? How far do these limits go? What about the
Okay, well, I'll say then I don't think it's right to just slaughter a bunch of people. That does seem really fucked up, but I think that people should be able to figure out how to get rid of their colonizers.
Professor Flowers thinks that colonized people have a right to decide what to do about the colonizers. But at the same time, she realizes she doesn't think it's right to just kill a bunch of people. She doesn't want a genocide.
Say we can agree that, like, okay, mass genocide isn't good. How about that? Like, we agree on that.
She is struggling to reconcile her anti-genocide position with the conclusion of her own argument. Unfortunately, how her premises may be modified to reach a conclusion that foregoes inordinate amounts of violence is not straightforward. Having a precise moral system in this situation would allow to clearly dissect what is good and what is bad. This would help in not repeating the conclusion that leads to the confusion unchanged.
I explicitly asked you about the mass deportation of the 6 million white people in South Africa, and you said that it was the right of black South Africans to do that. You're saying that they have a right to commit a genocide. That's a pro-genocide stance as far as I'm concerned.
I think they have the right to at least figure out if they want the colonizers to be there or not, and like how to do that process. But yeah.
Well,
moreover, a moral theory can also help in justifying and reflecting on ethical positions, allowing one to be precise when talking about moral issues, and avoiding uncomfortable, infinite regresses.
Let me test your intuitive system then, okay? Let's hit it then. Is it wrong to hit a person?
It absolutely depends on the material conditions and the situation and the objective social relations at play. There's no universal answer to that question.
Yeah, okay, so I agree with that. So let's say, okay, let's use an example where all of the cases are known. You said that I was too vitriolic to Luna. Why is that bad?
I said that you need to look at the evidence that is being presented to you and consider whether you think it's bad or not. I'm asking you to apply this kind of analysis to your own platform.
Well, I've done that, but you clearly think it was bad because otherwise you wouldn't take issue with it enough to talk to me about it. You think I've acted in error.
Because I saw evidence, which is that after you talked about her, not just once, but every time you've done a stream about her, I saw a huge uptick in people throwing racist, vitriolic shit at her.
Why is that bad?
She doesn't usually receive on that scale. That's the evidence I presented to you.
Okay, why is that
I was
bad?
convinced by that. Excuse me?
Why is that bad?
Why is that bad? Why is that bad? Because a human being suffered as a direct result of actions that you performed.
Do you think that human suffering is always bad? What about when we shot Nazis?
I don't think that Luna, if you think that Luna deserves to suffer, do you think Luna deserves to suffer? Is that your point here? By being attacked by racists? Is that what you're saying?
You're the one who said that it was bad because a person suffered. So logically, I extend from that you think when suffering happens.
Are you denying that it's bad that Luna suffered because racists sent racist vitriol at her?
I'm asking you your position. Why was it bad?
I would say it's definitely bad. Because it's promoting the racist system of white supremacism, which oppresses billions of people around the planet.
Why is that bad?
It is bad because we should seek to liberate all of humanity from oppression.
Why?
So the main point of Marx and Engels is you realize that the main point of dialectical materialism and historical materialism is to free humanity from all class antagonisms so that we can finally begin writing history ourselves. That's basically the way that they put it.
Why do they think that was worth doing?
Because throughout modern history, throughout history since class antagonisms arose, let's put it that way, human beings have been driven forward by oppressive relations with the means of production. And that limits humans and it causes a lot of suffering.
I don't understand these terms. You already said suffering can be good or bad. Limiting? What makes these things bad? I don't understand.
Okay, limiting oppression, giving people the ability to develop their own material conditions and to have the freedom to do what they want. That's what they talked about in.
Why should people have freedom? Should people have freedom to murder?
Vaush, freedom to live.
It would be nice to have an ethical system you could apply to answer these questions, right?
Here, non-compete is struggling to answer Vaush's questions because he does not have a clear definition of what is good and what is bad. that would be provided by a moral theory. Unfortunately, the significance of having a moral framework is sometimes misconstrued.
Here's the thing. This notion that you are having your opinions challenged in the marketplace of ideas is a silly one. That would make Ben Shapiro the most intelligent person on the internet.
Hey, you're not a man if you think you're a man. And if I call you a moose, are you suddenly a moose?
This
Okay,
is why I absolutely fucking despise debate bros, because you don't care about the actual morality behind the ideology that you supposedly believe in. You don't care about the outcomes. You do not have like a well-grounded materialist perspective on issues. You are simply going towards who is the most powerful intellectual gladiator.
On the contrary, debaters like Vaush and Destiny care a lot about the underlying morality of their positions, because they want to be able to argue for stances that are in line with their moral system. They don't want to be catched in a contradiction. The type of debates done online are different than the classical formal academic debate. They have less rules, they tend to have way longer back and forths, and as a consequence, can go more in depth.
It ain't the same fucking ballpark, it ain't the same league, it ain't even the same fucking sport.
Good online debaters want to foolproof their beliefs as much as possible, because they are going to get challenged in full. So they choose beliefs that are in line with their normative theories, and test them through hypotheticals in their spare time to see how defensible they are. They want to have correct beliefs. They know that rhetoric is not the only thing that correlates with changing people's minds. Good arguments matter too, and good arguments go hand in hand with defensible beliefs, that by the way, have an importance that overreaches debates. More on that later. To conclude this section, here is non-compete basically giving a summary of what we have said up until now.
So you can kind of tell when somebody is a sophist by looking at their worldview, right? Examining their worldview. Is it consistent? Is it coherent? Do they have clearly defined and established values? And do they have a clear, easy to identify perspective, right? Do they have a starting point where they see the world in a certain way? Do they have a philosophy that underlies everything that they say? You're looking for consistency and coherency in perspective. Sophists use eclecticism. Eclecticism is a hodgepodge philosophical framework in which you just grab points from wherever they're convenient to build your case. You can think of it as trying to build like a case from an a priori position, meaning you start with a conclusion and then you backtrack and look for evidence to support the conclusion that you made at the beginning.
Well spoken. Having a moral theory is a good way to avoid sophistry and be more coherent and consistent. Debaters can do better too. And luckily, the two biggest and most active lefty debaters are both kind of enamored with edginess. Maybe it's the consequence that they grew up in a different internet era. Maybe it's part of the reason they are successful, maybe not. In general, debaters, especially those that stream often, tend to get an inordinate amount of hate due to their unique line of work. To continue debating, they must build a tolerance to the hate, and this probably leads them to misjudge the tones regular people are used to, that in turn creates other hate. Debaters may get kind of stuck in this spiral of edginess. This though isn't a valid excuse to be downright vile to people. Practicing kindness may be the key to weaken the vicious cycle, so as not to repel newcomers that are dissuaded by the sheer level of vitriol they see. Now, for the very important conclusion. Bad reasoning can make good people do terrible things. Up until now, we are focused on the controversies surrounding debate content. But there is an even more fundamental reason to care about ethical systems, arguments, and hypotheticals, and that is to inform one's own political positions. Just as people can make mistakes, political parties and ideologies can too. The left could be wrong about certain subjects, or get co-opted by nefarious political forces. If one is only reading leftist theory, it might be hard to recognize if these things are happening. It's good to develop the tools to critically analyze our own political stances individually and independently. Understanding the roadmap or line debaters follow to see if a belief they have is defensible or not is a good starting point to do just that. Being clear on the definitions of what is good and bad. Building valid arguments for why certain positions are good. And subsequently critically reflect on the conclusions we draw. We shouldn't just be blindly pushing leftism because it's on the left. We shouldn't just be growing the left by supporting any type of radical lefty idea. The goal of online politics shouldn't be to follow any ideology or group out of principle, nor to get as many people as possible to join your in-group through appeals to emotion or peer pressure alone. The goal should be to reach political positions that are as ethically justified as possible. An objective that can be achieved only through good reasoning. Poor reasoning can lead to a lot of harm, even with good intentions. Hey, hi. I was having this most peculiar dream. I was watching this absurd video that thought it could solve the problems of internet politics by urging people to be reasonable. I hope it is clear that I don't hate anybody I've mentioned or critiqued in this video. Actually, I see a lot of well-intentioned people. This is something I often do. Maybe I'm naive, but yeah. The hope is that the video might help people understand where those pesky debate bros are coming from, and ultimately, hopefully do some broader good to online politics in general. A man can dream. Lots of happiness to all.